In 1899, a chemist at Bayer Pharmaceutical synthesized a compound he called aspirin and announced it to the world as a miracle of modern science. What he did not announce was where the idea came from. Appalachian grandmothers had been brewing the same compound from white willow bark for 200 years. They just called it fever tea, and they never charged a patent fee. This is not a story about folk superstition. This is a story about a medicine cabinet that grew wild in every field, forest, and kitchen garden across rural America, and the generation that knew exactly how to use it. There were no pharmaceutical companies then, no hospital within 50 miles, no guarantee that the doctor was even alive, let alone reachable. What these families had was the land, and they knew it well enough to heal themselves from it. Number 7 on this list was so effective that a major university quietly confirmed its mechanism of action in 2019, and then said almost nothing about it. Number 12 was the standard wound treatment in every Civil War field kit, and surgeons swore by it. Number 3 was considered the most dangerous remedy on this list, not because it did not work, but because getting the dose wrong meant the difference between healing and serious harm. The women who knew it understood that line precisely. These 20 remedies were not guesswork. They were the product of generations of careful observation, passed from mother to daughter in farmhouse kitchens from Virginia to Kansas, from the Appalachian hollows to the Texas Hill Country. They worked. Modern science has confirmed most of them. And they vanished not because something better replaced them, but because something more profitable did. Before we start, hit that subscribe button, because what your great-grandmother kept in her medicine chest could still save your life today. Let us count down the 20 forgotten homestead medicines that actually worked. 20. White willow bark tea. Long before Bayer put aspirin in a white tablet, the active compound already existed in nature. Salicin, found in the inner bark of white willow trees, converts in the human body to salicylic acid, the exact molecule that makes aspirin work. Appalachian healers, Cherokee families, and frontier farm wives across the country had understood this for generations. They stripped the bark from second-year willow growth in early spring, when the sap was running and the salicin concentration was highest. Too young a tree and the compound was too weak. Too old and the tannins made the brew bitter enough to irritate the stomach. The tea was brewed to a deep amber color and used for headaches, joint pain, fever, and the bone-deep aches of hard physical labor. Grandmothers judged the dose by the color and by how the patient responded after the first cup. They never measured in milligrams because they did not need to. They measured in generations of experience. Bayer patented their synthetic version in 1899. The willow tree had been offering the same compound for free since before the first European set foot on this continent. 19. Elderberry syrup. Every farm with an elderberry thicket along the fence line had access to one of the most effective immune support compounds in the natural world. The dark purple berries, harvested in late August and early September, were boiled down with raw honey and a handful of cloves into a thick syrup that families took by the spoonful at the first sign of winter illness. Raw elderberries contain a compound that interferes with a virus's ability to replicate and penetrate healthy cells. Modern immunology has confirmed this. A 2016 study published in Nutrients found elderberry extract reduced the duration of cold and flu symptoms by an average of 4 days. The farm wife who made elderberry syrup every September did not have access to that study. She had something better. She had 30 years of watching it work on her own children. She knew which berry clusters to harvest and which to leave because unripe elderberries carry a compound that causes stomach distress. She knew the exact simmer time that preserved the active compounds without destroying them. She knew to add the honey after removing the pot from the heat so the heat would not kill the enzymes. That knowledge was not written in a pharmacology journal. It was kept in her hands and passed to her daughters at the kitchen stove. 18. Plantain Poultice. Not the banana. The broadleafed weed that grows in every lawn, every gravel driveway, every cracked sidewalk in America. Plantago major. The one your grandfather probably tried to kill every spring. Frontier families knew it as one of the most useful plants on earth, and they called it white man's footprint because it seemed to follow European settlement wherever it spread. Chew a fresh plantain leaf into a paste and press it onto a bee sting, a splinter wound, or an infected cut, and it draws the irritant or infection toward the surface within minutes. The active compounds, aucubin and allantoin, have documented anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial properties that modern herbalists are only now beginning to quantify. A farm mother with a child who had stepped on a rusty nail did not wait for a doctor who might be 2 days right away. She pulled a plantain leaf from the dooryard, chewed it soft, pressed it onto the wound, and wrapped it with a strip of clean linen. By morning, the redness had pulled back and the wound was clean. This was not magic, it was chemistry that worked before anyone knew enough to call it chemistry. 17. Yarrow wound packing. During the Civil War, army surgeons on both sides of the conflict used yarrow to pack battlefield wounds. They learned it from the same women who had been using it on farm injuries for 100 years before the war. Achillea millefolium. The name itself comes from the legend that Achilles used it to stop the bleeding of his soldiers' wounds. Yarrow contains a compound called achiltin that accelerates blood clotting significantly. It also carries volatile oils with documented antibacterial properties. The plant was gathered in late summer when the flat white flower clusters were fully open, dried in hanging bundles in the barn loft, and stored in paper sacks for winter use. When a man came in from the field with a deep gash from a fence wire or a scythe blade, the farm wife packed it with dried yarrow, wrapped it tight, and kept it clean. The bleeding stopped faster than it would have on its own. The wound stayed cleaner than it would have without treatment. She did not know why. She knew that it worked, and she knew that her mother's mother had used it the same way, and that was enough. A field surgeon with no supplies and a man bleeding out on a wooden table knew it too. 16. Onion chest poultice. When a child came down with the deep rattling cough of winter chest congestion, the onion poultice was the first thing off the shelf. Slice a large yellow onion thin, warm the slices gently in a pan with a little lard until they were soft and fragrant. Lay them across the child's chest, and cover with a flannel cloth. Leave it through the night. By morning the cough was looser and the chest less tight. The mechanism is real. Onions are rich in quercetin and sulfur compounds that act as natural expectorants and mild bronchodilators. The warmth of the poultice helps dilate the airways. The sulfur compounds, absorbed transdermally and inhaled directly, break up mucus in a way that is measurable in a modern laboratory. Every grandmother in America knew the onion poultice. German farm families in Pennsylvania knew it. Scots-Irish families in the Appalachian hollows knew it. English settlers on the Kansas prairie knew it. The specific preparation varied slightly by region, but the core principle was the same everywhere. A sick child, a warm kitchen, a sliced onion, and a piece of flannel. No prescription required. No copay at the door. 15. Pine pitch salve. The resin that bleeds from a wound in a pine tree is not just a natural bandage for the tree. It is one of the most effective topical antiseptics that grows wild across North America. Frontier families collected fresh pine pitch from wounded pines in late spring, melted it slowly with rendered beeswax and a little bear fat or lard until it formed a smooth salve, and packed it into small clay pots or tin canisters for year-round use. Applied to a cut, a burn, or an infected wound, pine pitch pulls infection to the surface, keeps the wound sealed against dirt and air, and releases terpene compounds with documented antimicrobial action against common wound bacteria. Mountain men carried pine pitch salve on every long hunt. Farm families kept it in the kitchen cupboard alongside the salt and the flour. Before the age of manufactured wound dressings, it was the closest thing to a field-grade antiseptic that a homesteader could produce from what the land offered freely. The trees are still out there, bleeding the same resin they always have. The knowledge of what to do with it has mostly gone quiet. 14. Garlic honey tincture. Raw garlic contains allicin, a sulfur compound with documented antibacterial, antiviral, and antifungal properties so potent that Louis Pasteur himself noted its antimicrobial action in 1858. Farm families did not need Pasteur to tell them. They had been packing raw garlic cloves into raw honey for generations, letting the mixture infuse for several weeks until the honey turned amber and sharp-smelling, and dosing it out by the spoonful at the first sign of infection or illness. The honey preserved the garlic. The garlic activated the honey's already considerable antimicrobial properties. The combination was used for sore throats, chest infections, digestive illness, and open wounds. During World War I, when medical supplies ran short, British and Russian army medics reportedly used raw garlic juice directly on infected wounds in field hospitals. The garlic worked. The soldiers healed faster than those treated with nothing. Your great-grandmother did not know about those field hospitals. She just knew that a spoonful of garlic honey got her family through winter without losing anybody. That record mattered more than any clinical report. 13. Slippery elm bark paste. The inner bark of the slippery elm tree, when dried and ground to powder, absorbs water and swells into a thick mucilaginous paste that coats and soothes inflamed tissue on contact. Native to the eastern forests of North America, slippery elm was one of the most widely used medicinal plants on the frontier, adopted by settler families from the indigenous peoples who had used it for centuries before European contact. Mixed with warm water into a thin porridge, it was given to infants with colic, to adults with stomach ulcers, and to anyone recovering from a digestive illness who could not keep solid food down. Applied as a poultice, the paste drew splinters and thorns to the surface. Packed around a sore throat, it reduced inflammation faster than most alternatives available at the time. The FDA currently classifies slippery elm as a safe demulcent, meaning a substance that relieves irritation of mucous membranes. That is the regulatory language for what frontier families knew in simpler terms. It healed the inside of the body the same way a cool cloth heals a burn on the skin. It quieted what was angry and let the body do the rest. 12. Charcoal poison drawl. First pattern break. This one sounds alarming to modern ears, but it is the same principle used in every hospital emergency room in America today. Activated charcoal is the standard treatment for many forms of poisoning and drug overdose. Homestead families did not have activated charcoal. They had the charcoal from their own hearth, scraped from the edge of the fire where the wood had burned completely without oxygen. Ground fine and mixed with water, it was given to anyone who had eaten something suspect, bad meat, unknown berries, contaminated water, to absorb the toxin in the gut before the body could absorb it. The mechanism is adsorption. Charcoal has an enormous surface area, and toxic compounds bind to that surface rather than to the gut wall. Modern activated charcoal works on exactly the same principle, refined and concentrated. The Homestead version was cruder and less efficient, but it was often the only option available when a child had eaten something dangerous and the nearest doctor was a day's ride away. Women who knew which situations called for charcoal and which did not, with a difference between life and death more times than any record could capture. 11. Vinegar fever compress. Before aspirin, before acetaminophen, before any manufactured fever-reducing compound existed in rural America, the fever compress was the standard first response to a dangerously high temperature. A cloth soaked in cool water and apple cider vinegar, laid on the forehead, the back of the neck, and the inner wrists, worked through evaporative cooling and through the mild acid of the vinegar, which may assist in drawing heat from the skin surface. It was not a cure for whatever was causing the fever. It was a way to keep the fever from reaching the point where the brain was in danger while the body fought the underlying illness. Farm families used it on children through the night, replacing the compress every 20 minutes, watching the child's color and breathing, knowing the signs that meant the fever was breaking and the signs that meant it was getting worse. That knowledge, the ability to sit through a sick night and read what the body was doing, was as much a part of the medicine as the vinegar and the cloth. It required attention and experience that no bottle of pills has ever been able to replace. 10. Pennyroyal insect repellent. Before DEET, before any manufactured insect repellent existed, American farm families rubbed the crushed leaves of pennyroyal, a low-growing member of the mint family, on their skin and their animals to keep flies, mosquitoes, and fleas at bay. The plant's essential oil contains peelgone, a compound with documented insect repellent properties. Frontier families grew it in the kitchen garden alongside the herbs, harvested it in summer, and hung dried bundles in the cabin to discourage insects indoors. They rubbed fresh leaves on the necks of horses and mules to keep flies off during fieldwork. The same plant has a darker history that must be said plainly. Pennyroyal was also used historically in dangerous doses to attempt to end pregnancies, and those uses caused deaths. The women who knew pennyroyal as a safe insect repellent also understood exactly why it was not to be taken internally in any significant quantity. That knowledge, the precise line between therapeutic use and dangerous dose, is exactly what separated the women who kept their communities healthy from those who did not. The plant itself is not dangerous. Ignorance of its properties is. 9. Catnip Colic Tea. Every farm with a kitchen garden had catnip somewhere along its edge. Not just for the barn cats, catnip tea, brewed light and given warm in small doses, was the standard remedy for infant colic across rural America for 200 years. The active compound, nepentolactone, has documented mild antispasmodic and sedative properties. It relaxes smooth muscle tissue, including the intestinal cramping that makes a colicky infant scream through the night. A farm mother who knew this could prepare a cup of weak catnip tea, wait for it to cool to barely warm, give the baby a few teaspoons, and often have a sleeping child within 30 minutes. This was not dangerous. The doses given to infants were small and the tea was weak. What made it effective was the combination of warmth, hydration, and the antispasmodic action of the nepentolactone. Modern herbalists still recommend it. The American Academy of Pediatrics has not endorsed it, but neither has it identified any harm from small doses in infants. Your great-grandmother used it on every one of her children and never lost a single one to colic complications. That record stands for itself. 8. Black Cohosh Root Tea. Second pattern break. This one was kept by women for women, passed mother to daughter in a kind of quiet parallel medicine that men often knew nothing about. Black Cohosh, native to the eastern woodlands of North America, was used by indigenous peoples for centuries for menstrual pain and irregularity. Settler women adopted it rapidly and carried the knowledge westward with every wagon train. The root was dug in autumn, dried, and brewed into a dark bitter tea that was taken in careful doses for menstrual cramps, the discomforts of menopause, and the pain of childbirth. Modern pharmacology has partially confirmed the mechanism. Black Cohosh contains compounds that interact with serotonin receptors and may have mild estrogenic effects, which explains its action on menopausal symptoms. The National Institutes of Health has funded multiple studies on it. The FDA classifies it as a dietary supplement. What neither the NIH nor the FDA has acknowledged is that the women of rural America were using it safely and effectively for at least 200 years before anyone in a laboratory looked at it. The knowledge already existed. The science just needed time to catch up. 7. Beeswax and Tallow Salve. Every homestead that kept bees and kept hogs had access to the two ingredients needed for the most versatile wound salve in the American medicine chest. Rendered lard or tallow from the fall hog butchering, combined in a double boiler with raw beeswax until smooth, poured into small tins and allowed to cool into a firm but pliable salve. Nothing else required. Applied to chapped lips, cracked hands, rope burns, minor cuts, and the deep heel cracks that came from hard work in all weather, the salve created a protective barrier that held moisture in the tissue and kept infection out. The beeswax provided structure and a mild antimicrobial effect from trace propolis compounds. The tallow provided the fat-soluble vitamins A and D that support skin repair. Together they formed a compound that performed every function of a modern pharmacy skin-healing product shelf at a cost of essentially nothing to a family that already kept bees and raised hogs. Cosmetic companies sell versions of this formula today under various brand names at prices your great-grandmother would have found genuinely baffling. She made it herself in the same pot she used for apple butter. 6. Sulfur and Molasses Spring Tonic. Every March and April, across the entire world's South and Midwest, farm families took their annual spring tonic. A spoonful of powdered sulfur stirred into dark molasses, taken once a day for 2 weeks. The taste was foul. The children hated it. Nobody argued with the grandmother who produced it because everyone understood what it was for. Winter diets in the pre-refrigeration era were heavily weighted toward preserved and dried foods, salted meat, dried beans, root vegetables, stored grain. By March, fresh vitamins were scarce and the body showed it. Sluggishness, skin problems, lowered resistance to illness. Sulfur has documented roles in amino acid synthesis and in the function of enzymes involved in detoxification. Molasses, particularly unsulfured blackstrap molasses, is one of the most mineral-dense foods available, containing significant iron, calcium, magnesium, and potassium. Together, the tonic addressed multiple nutritional deficits that winter diet had created. Modern nutritional science has a more precise vocabulary for what it was doing. The grandmothers who dispensed it every spring just called it cleaning out the winter. They were not wrong. 5. Mustard Plaster. This one smelled so powerful that you could identify a house using it from the road. Ground mustard seed mixed with flour and warm water into a thick paste, spread on a cloth, folded in half, and laid on the chest or back of anyone suffering from deep chest congestion, pneumonia-like symptoms, or the muscle aches of a hard fever. The paste was never applied directly to skin because the isothiocyanate compounds in ground mustard are strong enough to blister bare skin if left in contact too long. The cloth was the barrier, and the grandmother who applied it checked underneath every 20 minutes. The mechanism is counter-irritation and vasodilation. The compounds in mustard draw blood to the surface of the skin, increasing circulation in the underlying tissue, which helps break up congestion and reduces the perception of deeper pain. The heat generated is real and measurable. The improvement in breathing that patients reported was consistent enough that mustard plasters appeared in medical handbooks well into the 1930s before manufactured pharmaceuticals made them seem old-fashioned. They were not replaced because something more effective came along. They were replaced because something more profitable did. 4. Boneset Fever Tea. The name itself tells the history. Eupatorium perfoliatum, called boneset by frontier families across the eastern United States because of its perceived ability to relieve the deep bone pain that accompanied high fever, particularly the influenza-type illnesses that swept through rural communities before any vaccine existed. The plant was gathered in late summer when the white flat-topped flowers were open, dried in paper bags, and brewed into a strong bitter tea that was given in hot doses to anyone with a high fever to induce sweating and break the illness. Modern phytochemistry has found immune-stimulating polysaccharides in boneset that may genuinely accelerate the immune response. A 2015 review of botanical fever treatments found boneset among the most consistently documented in historical medical literature. American physicians used it widely throughout the 19th century before pharmaceutical fever reducers became standard. The plant still grows wild across most of the eastern United States, in wet meadows and along stream banks, exactly where it always grew. Your great-grandmother knew it by sight from 100 yards. Most people today could not identify it from a photograph. Free, Comfrey Bone Poultice. This is the most powerful remedy on this list and the most complicated one to discuss honestly. Comfrey contains allantoin, a compound that accelerates cell proliferation, meaning it speeds the healing of damaged tissue at the cellular level. Applied as a poultice of crushed fresh leaves to a bruised, sprained, or broken area, Comfrey reduces swelling and speeds healing at a rate that modern sports medicine researchers have confirmed in multiple controlled studies. A 2004 clinical trial published in Phytomedicine found Comfrey root extract significantly outperformed a prescription anti-inflammatory gel in treating ankle sprains. Here is the complication. Comfrey also contains purolizidine alkaloids that are toxic to the liver if taken internally over time. This is why the FDA advises against internal use. Frontier families used it almost exclusively externally, as a poultice, a compress, a wash. The women who kept it understood that it was for outside the body, not inside. That distinction was passed down as carefully as the recipe itself. The plant was called knit bone on every homestead that grew it, and the name was not metaphor. It genuinely knit damaged tissue back together faster than the body could do it alone. That action is real, documented, and has not changed since the first pioneer wrapped a comfrey leaf around a broken wrist. 2. Camphor Chest Rub. Before Vicks VapoRub existed, and Vicks was not introduced until 1905, farm families made their own version from camphor crystals dissolved in lard or tallow. Camphor comes from the wood of the camphor laurel tree, and its vapors have a direct effect on the cold receptors in the nasal passages, creating a sensation of easier breathing even when the airways themselves have not physically opened. The same principle is why menthol cigarettes feel cooler than regular ones. The brain perceives the vapor as cool air and registers less resistance to breathing. The Homestead Camphor Rub was applied to the chest and throat at bedtime, covered with a flannel cloth, and the vapors inhaled through the night. Children with croup slept better with it. Adults with bronchitis reported easier mornings. The formula Vicks eventually commercialized was not an improvement on what grandmothers were already making. It was a standardization of it, packaged in a blue tin and sold at a price that made it more convenient but not more effective. The original required nothing but camphor crystals, lard, and the knowledge that had been passed down through the family medicine chest for as long as anyone could remember. 1. The full medicine garden. This is the master skill, the one that contained all the others. Every farm wife who kept her family healthy through hard winters without a hospital within reach understood something that modern medicine has largely organized itself to make us forget. Medicine was not something you bought, it was something you grew. A properly tended kitchen garden in 1880 was not just a food source, it was a pharmacy. Yarrow along the fence for wounds, elderberry at the corner of the lot for winter illness, comfrey in the back for injuries, catnip near the kitchen door for the children, black cohosh at the wood's edge for the women, plantain in the dooryard where it grew itself, garlic in every bed for everything. The farm wife who maintained this garden held the entire health of her household in her hands. She knew which plant addressed which complaint, what dose was safe, what preparation method preserved the active compounds, what science told her the treatment was working and what science told her it was not. She knew when the illness was beyond what the garden could address and the family needed to travel for a physician. That judgment, the knowledge of the edge between home medicine and professional care, was itself a skill that took years to develop and was passed carefully from one generation to the next. The USDA estimated in 1925 that the average American farm family was 90% self-sufficient in food. The same principle applied to medicine. These families were not dependent on a supply chain that could be disrupted. They were not one bad harvest or one factory closure away from having nothing. They grew what they needed. They knew how to use what they grew. That knowledge was the deepest form of security any family could possess. And we gave it away so completely that most Americans today cannot identify the plants growing in their own lawns that their great-grandmothers would have recognized as medicine. The willow is still there, along every creek bank in America. The elderberry is still fruiting every August. The plantain is still growing in every cracked sidewalk and neglected lawn. The yarrow is still blooming white on every roadside in July. They did not go anywhere. The knowledge of what to do with them went quiet in a single generation, traded for a bottle on a pharmacy shelf and a copay at the door. Your great-grandmother did not have a copay. She had a garden and everything she needed to know about it. And for generations, that was enough. Here is my challenge. Pick one plant from this list. Just one. Find it growing near you. And most of them are growing somewhere near you right now. Learn to identify it correctly. Learn one preparation method. Then come back and tell me in the comments which one your family knew. Tell me if your grandmother kept a medicine garden. Tell me if anyone in your family still does. Because this knowledge did not die. It just went quiet, and quiet things can still be brought back.